License and registration, Mark Reynolds, a Democrat with a known left-leaning agenda, pulled her over with a smirk that promised trouble and demanded, his voice dripping with disdain as he leaned toward her window. But it was the glint in his eye, part defiance, part threat, that made Pam's blood run cold. When he recognized her name, his sneer widened. "Attorney General Bondi, huh? Trump's little enforcer," he said, his finger jabbing at her like a dagger. "You're the one meddling where you don't belong." In that instant, Pam realized this wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a declaration of war, one that would unearth a web of corruption, political vendettas, and crimes so severe they'd shake the nation. The question wasn't whether she'd survive the fight. It was whether justice would. Pam kept her composure, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "I'm here to work with local law enforcement, not against you," she said, locking eyes with him. Reynolds scoffed, his face twisting with contempt. "Work with us? Your kind wants to lock us up while you let criminals run free," he snapped, referencing a recent protest where an officer was injured, an event he blamed on Republican policies. Pam noticed his body cam wasn't recording, a clear violation of the Department of Justice rules she'd championed. "Why is your camera off, officer?" she asked, her tone sharp. Reynolds' grip on his ticket book tightened, his jaw clenching. "I don't need Washington breathing down my neck," he shot back, scribbling the citation and thrusting it at her. "Stay out of our way, ma'am." As he stepped back, Pam's fingers moved to her phone, discreetly starting a recording. She caught him muttering under his breath, "Make sure the feds don't find out," and knew she'd just stumbled into something far bigger than a speeding ticket. Driving away, her heart pounded harder than it had in years. Reynolds' words echoed in her mind. His anger, the missing body cam, that cryptic mutter. She was in Kentucky to meet with local sheriffs, pushing her initiative as Attorney General to roll out new police training protocols nationwide. The Trump administration had chosen her for her tough-on-crime record as Florida's AG, hoping she'd bridge the gap between conservatives and those demanding accountability. But this encounter with Reynolds, a known Democrat who'd openly supported left-leaning causes, felt like a direct challenge, a sign her work was hitting nerves she hadn't anticipated. She needed to dig deeper. Her next stop was a meeting with Sheriff Laura Bennett, and Pam walked into the sheriff's office with her senses on high alert. Bennett greeted her with a polite nod. "Welcome, Attorney General," she said, her voice calm but her eyes guarded. Pam laid out her plan for updated training and mandatory body cam usage, aiming to win Bennett's support. "These changes will build trust," Pam said. Bennett's response was cautious. "I understand, but our budget's stretched thin, and the DOJ's investigations have my people on edge." When Pam mentioned the traffic stop with Reynolds, Bennett's expression tightened for a moment. "Mark's opinionated," she said, quickly changing the subject. Pam noted the reaction, her suspicions growing. That night, Elena Carter, a journalist who'd been investigating the sheriff's department, called with urgency in her voice. "I've got information you need to hear," she said. They met at a diner, and Elena didn't waste time. "Mark Reynolds is under review for a bad arrest. Jamal Carter, a young man hurt during a stop. Witnesses say Mark planted drugs to cover it up. The DOJ is looking into it, but the dashcam footage vanished." Pam's stomach churned. Reynolds again, tied to a case her team was already investigating. "Why tell me?" she asked. Elena's gaze was intense. "You're the Attorney General. You can hold him accountable, unless you're too scared to take on someone with his connections." The challenge stung, and Pam knew she couldn't ignore it. Back at her hotel, Pam used her DOJ access to pull Reynolds' recent cases. The Jamal Carter file confirmed Elena's account. Charges dropped after witnesses disputed the report, and the dashcam footage was gone. But as she dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Several locals with known Republican affiliations had been targeted by Reynolds for minor infractions, only to face excessive punishment. One man, a farmer named Tom Ellis, was arrested for a supposed noise violation during a Trump rally, but ended up with a broken arm and a trumped-up assault charge. Another, a business owner named Sarah Jennings, was fined heavily for a parking violation near a Republican fundraiser, with her car impounded for weeks on what looked like fabricated grounds. Pam played her phone recording again, focusing on Reynolds's muttered words. "Make sure the feds don't find out." This wasn't just about one bad arrest. Reynolds was waging a political vendetta. The next morning, Pam confronted Sheriff Bennett, her voice unwavering. "I know Mark Reynolds tampered with evidence in the Carter case, and I found records of him targeting Republicans, Tom Ellis, Sarah Jennings, and others. He's abusing his power. Why are you protecting him?" Bennett's face went pale, her hands clenching. "Mark's a Democrat, always has been, and he's vocal about it," she admitted. "He's been harder on folks tied to your party, but I thought it was just politics, not this. I didn't know how far he'd gone." Pam pressed harder. "There's more to this, isn't there?" Bennett hesitated, then spoke quietly. "There's been whispers. Mark's involved in bigger things I can't prove. You'll need more than what you've got." Before Pam could act, Elena's article broke online, featuring a blurry photo of the traffic stop, Pam's hand raised, Reynolds pointing, under the headline, "AG faces off with left-wing cop." Social media erupted, some praising Pam for confronting a biased officer, others accusing her of targeting Democrats. Her phone buzzed with calls from DOJ aides and political advisors. "This could sink you if you don't handle it," one aide warned. Pam felt the pressure closing in. Exposing Reynolds could validate her push for accountability, but his political affiliations made this a lightning rod. Progressives might see her as weaponizing her role against their side, while conservatives would demand blood. Pam decided to dig deeper, working late into the night with DOJ investigators over the phone. What they uncovered was worse than she'd imagined. Reynolds wasn't just targeting Republicans. He was part of a small group of officers extorting locals, using his badge to intimidate and punish those who didn't align with his politics. One case stood out. A Republican councilman named David Harper had been arrested on false drug charges after refusing to pay Reynolds a protection fee. Harper's family reported threats, and bank records showed suspicious withdrawals matching the timeline of Reynolds' involvement. Another incident involved a young woman, Emily Carter, who'd been detained for hours without cause after attending a conservative event, her phone confiscated, her reputation smeared with rumors of drug use. The deeper Pam dug, the clearer it became. Reynolds wasn't just a biased cop. He was a criminal hiding behind his uniform. Pam confronted Reynolds at the sheriff's station, arranging the meeting under the guise of discussing her ticket. When she walked in, the tension was palpable, officers eyeing her with suspicion. Reynolds stood by the counter, arms crossed. "What do you want, Attorney General?" he asked, his voice cold. Pam played the recording, his muttered threat ringing out. "Explain this," she said, her tone unyielding. Then she laid out what she'd found. Tom Ellis, Sarah Jennings, David Harper, Emily Carter. You've been targeting Republicans, extorting them, falsifying charges. I've got evidence tying you to severe crimes. Reynolds's face drained of color, but he tried to deflect. "You're fishing, trying to take down someone who doesn't bow to your party," he spat. Pam didn't flinch. "This isn't about politics. It's about justice. You're done." She turned to Sheriff Bennett, who'd been listening silently. "You knew something was wrong. Help me end this." Bennett nodded, her voice low. "I'll back you. He's gone too far." Within hours, Pam coordinated with the DOJ to issue a warrant. Reynolds was arrested that evening, charged with evidence tampering, extortion, and abuse of power. The news spread fast, his arrest making national headlines as a Democrat officer brought down by a Republican AG, a story that fueled debates on both sides. The fallout was immediate. Jamal Carter's case was reopened, the missing footage recovered, and the locals Reynolds had targeted began speaking out. Pam watched the coverage, her name tied to both praise and backlash. Some called her a hero for rooting out corruption, others accused her of political bias. As she drove back to Washington, D.C., her phone rang. A DOJ colleague reporting another misconduct case in Chicago. The work wasn't over, and Pam knew this arrest was just the beginning. Justice, she realized, was a battle with no clear winners, always demanding more than she thought she could give. And as the road stretched on, one question lingered. How many more fights could she endure before the cost became too high?